Motion passes. Next, we will take up the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless otherwise noted. Do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda with the notation that in item 4 there was a non-material error in the staff report, and so I would direct staff to make that correction.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, nay. Motion passes. That takes us to the regular agenda. The first item on the regular agenda is the Delano Subdivision, is the public hearing. So I'll open the public hearing and we will begin with a staff report.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioners. For the record, Stacy Yarrington, Development Services. Tonight, I will be presenting the decision briefing for the proposed Delano subdivision. This item is on the regular agenda to allow for testimony from the neighboring residents who are concerned about the traffic impacts from the development. The proposed development is located northwest on the northwest corner of Eagle Road and Ustick Road between Centerpoint Way and Wainwright Drive. The proposal consists of 85 single-family dwelling lots and a lot designated for a future multifamily development on 15.2 acres. The single-family dwelling units are anticipated to generate 802 vehicle trips per day, with 85 trips in the PM peak hour. And the concept plan for the multifamily parcel includes 96 dwelling units and is anticipated to generate 522 vehicle trips per day with 42 trips in the PM peak hour. The applicant has proposed to extend the existing stub streets, Dashwood Place, which is a local street, and Centerpoint Way, a collector street, into the site, and proposing to stub Centerpoint Way to the north and to stub Jasmine Street, a local street, to the western property line. The residents of the Alpine Point subdivision, located north of this site, have expressed concerns regarding the effects this development will have on the existing streets. In March of this year, ACHD staff conducted a speed analysis and collected traffic counts on Wainwright Drive, the collector road, and east of Rose Point Avenue, which is this highlighted area here, and south of McMillan Road on Camas Creek Way, which is this area up here. Neither street segment study met the district criteria to require traffic calming, and there is no upfront on housing on the Wainwright Drive east of Rose Point Avenue, and a traffic signal was installed in 2013 at the intersection of Wainwright Drive and Eagle Road. District policy states that when local stub streets are connected and properties fully developed, average daily traffic on local streets should not exceed 2,000 vehicle trips per day. Through all phases of this development, Wainwright Drive is anticipated to operate at an acceptable planning threshold, and neighboring local streets are anticipated to have average daily traffic counts of less than 2,000. Centerpoint Way is an existing 2-lane commercial collector roadway stepping to this site from the south. The parcels along Centerpoint Way are fully developed. A shopping center is located on the east side of Centerpoint Way, north of Ustick. A multifamily dwelling units line the west side of Centerpoint Way, and the Brickyard Apartments is constructed on both sides of Centerpoint Way, immediately south of this site. In November of 2005, Block 7, Block 2, Zebulon Heights Subdivision, and that's shown in the light blue, they deeded it to ACHD an unimproved right-of-way to provide for the future connection of Centerpoint Way north to intersect Wainwright Drive, as depicted in the MSM. Under the development of the parcel north of this site, the developer will be required to construct Centerpoint Way north. Also worth noting, is Jasmine Lane here, which is a private lane, and the development will not have access to that private lane to enter onto Eagle Road. But this is the out parcel that will provide for that future connection. As previously mentioned, Centerpoint Way and Dashwood Place are proposed to be extended into the site, and those are shown in green. As Centerpoint Way does not currently extend to Wainwright Drive and is unable to be constructed as part of this development, staff is concerned that by extending the two existing stub streets, a de facto collector roadway will be created through the residential local streets, connecting the two collector streets, which is Centerpoint and Wainwright. To eliminate cut-through traffic between Centerpoint Way and Wainwright Drive, and to keep average daily traffic on Dashwood Place to less than 1,000 vehicle trips per day, staff recommends that the applicant temporarily not connect Jasmine Street to Centerpoint Way as part of this project, thus separating the single-family dwelling units north of the site from the multifamily developments and commercial properties south of the site. The connection of Jasmine Street to Centerpoint Way should be constructed when Centerpoint Way is connected to Wainwright Drive, or in 10 years, whichever comes first. The applicant will be required to dedicate the necessary right-of-way and to provide a road trust to fund the future design and construction of the Jasmine Street connection. Sidewalk will be constructed and placed in an easement to ensure pedestrian connectivity prior to the vehicle connection. In doing so, the interconnectivity of the neighborhood is preserved long-term while ensuring that no singular roadway exceeds district policy. This item is scheduled to be heard in front of the Meridian Zoning and Planning Commission on July 18th. The applicant and staff are in agreement on all conditions of approval, and I'd stand for any questions.
Madam President?
Okay, go ahead.
Stacy, who owns the parcel to the north where Centerpoint Way is supposed to go through?
Madam President, Commissioner Baker, I am not
Okay,
sure.
but it's not the applicant?
It is not the applicant. It is out of their control.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there other questions for staff at this time? All right, next we'll hear from the developer. And if you would, please state your name and address for the record.
Evening, members of the commission. My name is Deborah Nelson. I'm with Gibbons Pursley, and my address is 601 West Bannock Street. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Delano development team, who is here tonight, including our traffic engineer, in case you've got questions beyond what I can answer. The development team is in full support of the staff report with their recommended conditions of approval. So I just have a few brief comments. The Delano Subdivision is an infill residential project. This area is already largely built out. The surrounding developments that preceded us were always planned to connect through this property, as is evident from the constructed stub streets. So if you look to the north, you can see Dashwood comes down. It's incomplete. It was stubbed directly to this property. On the south side, we had Centerpoint Way that was stubbed to this property from the south. ACHD also plans to extend the north-south collector, as Stacy mentioned, through our property and eventually connect up to where you've required right-of-way to get to Wainwright Drive, which is the mid-mile collector and has a signal at Eagle Road. Delano will provide this planned connectivity. At the north, back to the Dashwood Place, will provide a boulevard entrance with attractive landscaping in the center, detached sidewalks and landscape strips. At the south, we'll connect down here to Centerpoint Way, and we will build the extension of the Centerpoint collector through our property, helping ACHD further their plans for that north-south connectivity. As proposed, Delano meets all of ACHD's policies, and there's sufficient capacity in all of the surrounding roadways without any mitigation. As Stacy described, to address some neighbor concerns to the north, ACHD staff has proposed to temporarily keep the southern entrance pointer to work at Centerpoint to limit that to an emergency access only. With this limitation, the single-family homes within our development will take their access through the single-family home neighborhood to the north. The multifamily product within our development will take their access through the south, through comparable multifamily and commercial development. This does place some additional expense on the developer. They're going to have to install and maintain the gate. They're going to have to road trust the money to complete this out into a full access. And they will go ahead and construct the pedestrian facilities at that lower entrance so that there is non-vehicular connectivity. But nonetheless, they are willing to do that. They're in support of the recommended condition of approval, and we ask for your support and approval as recommended by staff. I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the developer at this point?
I just have a question. Thanks. The staff report describes the speed control and traffic calming policies, which would be applied to both Jasmine and Centerpoint, at least the portions that the developer is supposed to develop. And it describes a number of things that are under that policy, bulb outs and chicanes and chokers and horizontal curbs and textured road surfaces and so forth in the policy. The only specific requirement that's listed specifically is a bulb out at Jasmine and Centerpoint, mostly because the entrance is going to be closed until such time as that last piece of property is opened. It doesn't preclude, obviously, you from actually putting traffic calming to ensure that the actual design speed is consistent with the posted speed. So has there been some discussion about what some of that other traffic calming speed management design features will be on Jasmine and on Centerpoint?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I'm not aware that any additional traffic calming is required or necessary or as determined by staff for that area, other than the recommended mitigation and condition that you saw in the staff report that you cited.
So you're just relying on the one requirement that the staff is requiring. I mean, it doesn't preclude you from doing that. My point being that, as we've discovered throughout the valley, roads, especially collector roads, once they're opened, they end up being areas where speeding is consistently beyond the speeds are beyond the posted limit. It's far, far less expensive to put those in when they're initially designed. Perhaps the best question is, are there some examples around in the valley? I know we're retrofitting one, Kootenai, at great expense to the taxpayers to make it consistent with the design. Are there some models that would ensure that once Jasmine is connected all the way through and Centerpoint is connected all the way through, the speeds will still be, the design speed will still be, 25 miles per hour? I assume that's be the posted speed. It's a neighborhood.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I think typically on the collectors of this side, the speed is 30 or 35, 30 usually in the residential. And I believe that part of the expectation is with the curvature that you can see on the remaining parcel, that the curvature is also going to create some de facto speed control there.
Okay, I guess I want a little more assurance that we won't come back to this in future and look at speeds that exceed, because this is so, I mean, the density is what the city wants, so there'll be a lot of people, a lot of kids, and the last thing we want, this will be a very heavily used collector to bypass the main arterial, so an encouragement, I suppose. We're not a requirement because we can only require so much, but to ensure that we don't have to come back on it later on. And if the developer wants to speak to that, I'm happy to hear. Otherwise, that's my big concern about opening up new collectors.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I appreciate the comment. I think that we would be responsive to anything that ACHD requires there. I think that you guys have policies that go in and look and see when that's warranted, and we certainly don't object to that.
Thanks.
All right, anything further at this time for the developer? No? All right. We have a number of people who have signed up. I understand we have a representative from one of the homeowners associations, and I would invite that person to come up first, and you'll be afforded 10 minutes.
The 10 minutes.
Okay,
The
and if you would-
person following me, I'd like to have, I just want to kind of set the stage a little bit for
Okay.
what you're going to hear, if that's okay. My presentation will just be a couple minutes.
Okay, just state your name and address for the record and let us know which HOA you represent.
Will do. Frank Marcos, 2580 East Lacewood Drive, Meridian 83646. I am a resident of Alpine Point and the HOA president as well. Madam President and Commissioners, thank you so much for giving us some time. We appreciate that. We have never not expected the development of that property. We've known that that's going to be developed. What we did not expect would be the amount of traffic that was going to be created through our subdivision because of those stub roads that are going to be opening up. We have probably more entry points now than any subdivision our size, and even some that are quite larger. And we are looking at the reality of 3 additional entry points: Center Point, Dashwood, and Rogue River, which is just to the west of Dashwood. So within about 100 yards, we're potentially going to have 3 more entry points from all of that area that you see south of the proposed development. From the beginning, Mr. Conger's neighborhood meetings with residents of Alpine Point, we've had a large turnout of concerned residents to work with Mr. Conger. However, not only did Mr. Conger not hear our suggestions, several times he mocked and showed great disrespect to the residents of Alpine Point by either laughing at suggestions during the meetings or even at one point throwing his drawing board at a resident that was asking questions. And I bring this up because to us it shows a complete lack of respect and unprofessionalism in trying to work with the neighbors. And that's all we've asked for, was just to be able to work with him. During the presentations, we have not had what we have felt was a fair representation from our side, that he would hear what we're trying to say. We know, as I said, that the development of this land is inevitable. We understand that, and we hope that ACHD, the Planning and Zoning, and Meridian City Council will consider options that we're going to try to propose tonight, and any other that we might be able to talk with Mr. Conger, if we can get to that point, to reevaluate his design and look at some possible new options. Alpine Point, our board created a neighborhood outreach committee to deal with issues such as this, and you're going to hear from some of those people tonight. And that's the first young lady up is Melissa. She is going to be presenting the presentation that's on the thumb drive that you'll see. We just hope that you'll listen and hear what we're trying to say, whereas we haven't had that luxury with Mr. Conger in our neighborhood meeting. So we thank you for your time, and we hope that you'll listen and really pay attention to what we're trying to say regarding what this development's going to do for Alpine Point.
Are there any questions? No?
Okay, thank you.
So then the next person up is, okay, and you are making the presentation for the Homeowners Association.
This evening, my name is Melissa Bernard. I live at 4025 North Dashwood Place in Meridian, and I am the lead on the community outreach that Frank was just mentioning. I have this right here. I did a PowerPoint presentation. First of all, I would like to thank the commissioners and the planning staff of Christy Little and Austin Miller for corresponding and fielding our phone calls, and thank you to the great neighbors of Alpine Point and the many people who have voiced their concerns about how this DevCo development project fits into our neighborhood's character, and it just doesn't seem to fit for many reasons. This right? Okay. Now let's come to the point how North Dashwood. When this was proposed in 2005, it passed through your commission, and it wasn't required to be a cul-de-sac. It was not required to be a cul-de-sac until it came to the city council in 2005. And when it came to that point, they realized that the Bollinger parcel, which happens to be in blue, was landlocked. Centerpoint Way did not exist to the north at this point. So they required the stub street to be put in for the Bollinger parcel. So again, place is not necessary for DevCo to develop. We have had 3 neighborhood meetings, and as you can see from all these representations, there has been little change in the plans. DevCo wants Dashwood for some reason. I'm not exactly sure. He hasn't really averred so. He has said before he needs Dashwood because of what's south of him. He said this at the neighborhood meeting of January. We have had 3 neighborhood meetings. There have been no reasonable modifications to this point. Now, I noticed that ACHD was willing to accept the exit or some sort of emergency exit down towards Centerpoint. We're proposing something like that. Perhaps maybe we have the emergency exit, pedestrian and bike exit at North Dashwood Place. And there's some reasons for this. There would be no cut-through traffic for our community. There would be no cut-through traffic for the Delano community. This is going to be like some sort of circuit. And also, there's room for a grand entrance down there at Centerpoint Way, as you can see. There could be 2 entrances to the south. You can notice that the model phase, the driveways are facing inward, so there's no problem with that. The traffic is then routed through a collector street made to handle the higher vehicle loads, that being an existing R4 neighborhood. And also, I did talk to Sarah Arjona at ITD, and she says she has no problem with Jasmine Lane being extended to the east, as long as it doesn't connect to Eagle Road. And she's going to write a report that'll get to ACHD and in front of the City Council before the meeting that's going to occur on July 18th. And there's a lot of good reasons for this. With 2 southeast entries, the vehicle trips per day will never exceed 1,000 trips per day on a single road, which happens to be a stipulation for 27-foot wide streets. And those are all the streets that are happening in this subdivision. Furthermore, there could be a construction lane that could be at Jasmine Street, and where East Kern can handle the flow of this traffic. Now, what happens here is our neighborhood's character is preserved. When you have a closed-loop neighborhood as being proposed, you're going to have more than 1,000 vehicle trips per day, which is going to exceed the loads of these roads. Because what's happening is you're going to have a route in and out through the same street, and that's our street. It's Dashwood Place. So what's occurring there is that you're going to have the Amazon deliveries, the pizza deliveries, everything going on, and it's going to be exceeding the 1,000 trips per day. If they're already in the 800s in the estimates, it's going to bump up. So it's going to be in violation of ACHD policy for the roads that are only going to be 27 feet wide at this point. So there's many benefits to this. The park can go anywhere they'd like. It's an emergency with bollards. There's not a closed gate. So mothers with bike trailers, people wanting to walk through. So this sort of thing is much more open than the gate proposal. Alternate plans have been submitted to ACHD, the City of Meridian, and presented to DevCo verbally and on paper. We have offered to meet. We realized the developer has had several meetings with staff and such. We've always offered to meet. We would probably like the same sort of consideration. We would like to, besides just writing letters and making phone calls, perhaps maybe have a little bit more face-to-face. So as you can see, this has happened several times. And as we were mentioning before, with 8 neighborhood connections that we're going to have in the future, we're going to have plenty of future traffic with a commercial collector. we're having a commercial collector through our neighborhood. We're going to be having people seeking routes, shortcuts to school, anything to bypass Eagle Road. So we've got 2 schools to the northwest, and what's going to be occurring is that everyone's going to take the path of least resistance. So therefore, we have a neighborhood with an R4 designation abutting an R15 neighborhood, and will be also connected to R40 neighborhoods. Now there is currently 359 apartment units to the south of us being built. Now we're going to have another additional 96, and with the future of the Wong parcel, the Hedrick parcel, and the Ketlinski parcel, we are going to take more than our fair share of the traffic and such. And we must also look towards future traffic patterns. Here are the current, proposed, and possible future traffic patterns that this area may experience. As you can see, Center Point Way runs east-west. It also runs north-south. There is plenty of access points for this development at Center Point Way existing, and also at the light of Center Point and U Stick. And we know collector roads are geared to handle thousands of vehicle trips per day. And therefore, we're hoping to sway, or at least get someone else to think about the possibility that DevCo develops and builds its entrances off the collector road, where it's geared to handle the traffic, and perhaps let our neighborhood maintain its peace and character at this point. And as you can see, let's not kill Jasmine Street, because this could be a very vital circuit for traffic. As I was saying, that I talked to Sarah Arjona today, and she's going to do a report that she says Jasmine Street can connect with the Fast Eddie stub between the Brickyard and the Fast Eddie's there, so it creates a nice circuit down to Center Point Way. And as you can see, the connection of the future with the Ketlinski parcel, we're going to be connected with Champion Park. We're going to be connected with the Bollinger parcel. We're going to be connected to the Cook and Wong parcel as well, not to mention the Brickyard Apartments, and there's an 80-unit fourplex to the south. So when these things happen, as things are rezoned, we're going to be very high density heavy. And, you know, it's under my understanding that there's a better way of doing this. There's alternate plans have been presented, and it kind of seems like the developer gets a lot more credence than the neighbors. So we're just looking for a fair shake. We're looking for some consideration, because right now, anything that's decided regarding this transportation, that's going to happen in this meeting. That might be an hour and a half. Well, it's going to affect us for years. So we're hoping for the best possible solution, and for the solution that kind of stinks the least. We know growth is coming, and we understand that it is coming. So when developers come in, they need to go to a route that can support the traffic. And if this is going to be anywhere close to 1,000, then the entrances need to be off the collector, not off of 8-resident cul-de-sac. So I got 21 seconds remaining. So does anyone have any questions for me?
Are there questions? No? All right.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. And please consider our Brooksburg neighbors when the commercial collector goes in for redesign. And let's continue. We would love to speak with ACDHD planners, and we'd like to speak with other people if there's any way that we can kind of get them to see our point. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much for hearing me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have some other people who have signed up to testify. I'm going to go through those one at a time, and then if you didn't check the box that you want to testify, we'll give you an opportunity at the end. So the next one who signed up is Mike Bernard.
Madam President, Mike Bernard, 4025 North Dashwood Place, Meridian, Idaho. I'm not going to repeat anything that has been said, but I would like to amplify a couple of things. And first, one point of clarification. ACHD did not initially require Dashwood to be stubbed out. It was originally planned as a cul-de-sac. It was the city of Meridian who put that condition in place, so just for clarity. And a couple of amplifying points. I think the alternate proposal that you saw presented just now is really a win-win for both neighborhoods for a couple of reasons. One is we maintain connectivity with everyone to the north and south for walking and bike traffic, which wouldn't necessarily be there with a gate blocking a previous road. And the second thing is there's no cut-through traffic either way, right? So the Delano neighborhood would be closed, so the only people going in and out of there would be those residents. And it would also limit the connectivity, which we feel is over-connectivity in our neighborhood, vehicular connectivity. And that's really the only points I had to make, unless there's any questions for me. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Anyone have questions? No? Okay. I do want to let you know that we received a number of emails on this item. Those emails through TELUS do go to all the commissioners, and we read those. So if you submitted an email, you don't need to read it into the record or repeat it, because we do see and read those. All right, the next person who's signed up is, looks like Ken Mackin. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next person who signed up is Sandy King. And if you would, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Sandy King. I live at 2453 East Honeywood Court in Meridian within Alpine Point. And I want to bring a map up. Melissa, do you know how to get back to yours?
Do we need some technical help?
The very last slide on her presentation.
All right. This one. Got it. This one. It. Yep.
Okay, is that the one you wanted?
That one.
That one, okay.
Thank you. So I want to thank you all for taking your time and listening to us and listening to our concerns. Traffic is a large issue. We have a lot of cut-through traffic because Eagle Road is so busy. So this diagram on the north is McMillan Road. It skirts the northern edge of Alpine Point. On the right side is Eagle Road. We have 5 existing egress/ingress points in our subdivision right now. I labeled them E as existing and F as future. I crossed out Dashwood because of the amount of volume. If Delano Subdivision is approved as it stands, the volume of transportation through there would be horrendous. There is I want to challenge the March 2019 traffic count. It was done during spring break. It was only on 2 of our 5 entrances into our subdivision, so you're not getting a clear picture. So our traffic routes out of Alpine Point on the west side into Settlers Bridge can then go to Locust Grove or on up to McMillan. Comes in from Eagle Road. There's 2 entrances, one off of Eagle and one off of McMillan, that come in through Madison Park and enter our subdivision. So you're talking only 2 entrances used rather than 5, and I think that will change the volume substantially. In 2013, when the volume was at 1,116, those were the 2 entrances for the most part. We did have the one going into Settlers, but the count was much higher. So if Delano Subdivision is allowed to come through our subdivision, we are going to be well above 1,000 and probably well above 2,000. You've got commercial property to the south and south of his subdivision and the apartments. Those will all be funneling through us if Dashwood is left open. We already have cut-through traffic that is speeding, so we're hoping for safety of our families and our children and our pets and our quality of life that you will consider changing this. I think Melissa's plan that she presented with a southern approach coming in rather than Dashwood, I think is a good entrance for the subdivision, for the individual homes, and I think everyone can be happy. You know, traffic is going to do just as Maggie said, it is going to be the least resistance, right? So people cut through subdivisions to stay away from the major highways because they are busy and you're going 4 or 5 lights waiting just to get through from one intersection, major intersection, to the next, as in Ustick and McMillan. So I hope you take our concerns to heart. And my last concern is, I was reading in your ACHD executive summary of March 16th under C2, it refers to existing streets that exceed the 2,000 ADTs that the county may consider speed control and calming. I don't know how you accomplish that once a subdivision is already developed and designed. That becomes very, very difficult. We're already at that point of having problems with traffic. So I'm not sure how you would handle that short of just approving it. And that, again, affects our quality of life within our subdivision because you can't restrict once those roads are open, short of closing them. So thank you. I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Are there questions? No?
No?
All right, the
Thank
next
you.
person who's signed up is Greg Walker. And please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Greg Walker, 2403 East Honeywood Court, Alpine Point. I just want to make a couple of points here. Zebulon Heights, which is the Alpine Point subdivision, was approved or started in 2003. The traffic light at Eagle Road and Wainwright was added in 2014. None of the people in Alpine Point, when they invested in these properties, had really planned to see this kind of development. The actual area to the south of us was zoned to medium density, the same as the Alpine Point subdivision. The Alpine Point subdivision added 211 homes, which have an approximate value of $100 million. And the reality is, when this was approved, I don't know if it went through ACHD, but the collector street, there's a discussion here of connecting Centerpoint to us, but Wainwright was not designed as a collector street. It was only partially designed as a collector street. So only from Dashwood over to Eagle Road is actually a collector. The rest of it is all frontage properties. All the houses on Lacewood, Rose Point, Camas Creek Way, everything is just a standard residential street. So when you connect Centerpoint or Dashwood into this southern collection of brickyard and apartment complexes, what you're going to see is all of these people coming down using Rose Point, Lacewood, and Camas Creek Way to get to McMillan and get over to Locust Grove. The reality is we're a vehicular-driven society. I know that high-density development is a great idea, and we believe that people walk around a lot, but that's not the truth, and you obviously know that, right? As you deal with this every day. That's why we're widening Ustick Road, we're widening Cloverdale, we're widening all these roads. When you connect this, we are not going to just see 2,000 trips a day. We're going to see far in excess of 2,000. You are definitely going to exceed this when you collect all of those businesses and all of those apartment complexes and shove them down Centerpoint into our neighborhood. They're going to have a choice. They can go over, take a right-hand turn, go to Eagle Road, or they can go left and go down Rose Point, Lacewood, and make that connection. You know what they're going to do, okay? So I would say, please respect our investment in our homes. We didn't know you were going to do this. We didn't see this development coming this way. We expected that medium density to be medium density, right? Please respect our investment, and please recognize what you approved in the past and what you're going to do to us as a neighborhood. I think that's really that's about what I have to say, I think. Any questions for me?
Are there questions? No? Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
I do. Please don't applaud or boo anyone, or it just doesn't add anything. So please just remain silent. I do need to remind you all, I think many people know this, but some don't. ACHD does not make decisions on density. We don't make the decision on zoning changes. We don't make any decisions on density. So it's really not appropriate to bring those comments here. Those comments need to go to the land use agency because they will decide your fate in that regard, whether you have high density next to you or not. All we can deal with are the road issues. All right, the next person who signed up is Dane. Is it Dave Bellamy or Dane? And if you would, please state your name and address for the record.
Bellamy, and I live
David.
at 4148 North Rogue River Way in Alpine Point. And my wife and I spent 35 years in Sandpoint in business, and we moved to Boise where our 3 sons live, and we're happy here. We have an RV, and I would say at least half of the homes in Alpine Point have RVs, and all the time that we have RVs, somebody's backing them in, pulling them out, backing in, pulling them out, backing them in, pulling them out. When you get that thoroughfare going through there, they're going to be stopped and stymied because of the RV hassles that we have. We bought in good faith that we were in a subdivision that approved RVs, and I know that's not your problem. But as a road standpoint, it's going to make many delays for you. And that's about all I have to say.
Are there questions?
Any questions?
And Susie Bellamy also signed up to testify if you'd like to add anything. All right, thank you. The next person who signed up is Laura. I cannot read the last name. 47. Thank you for letting me off the hook there. If you would state your name and address for the record.
My name is Laura Traratanopat. I am from 4621 North Camas Creek Way in Alpine Point. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you tonight. Wow. First of all, just a little point I'd like to point out from your document here. Section 72.06.2.5.4 of ACHD policy states in regard to stub streets, a sign shall be installed at the terminus of the stub street stating that, quote, this is a designated collector roadway. This street will be extended in the future. Now, I purchased my home in Alpine Point in 2012, which is when much of the construction of the homes there was still going on. So in 7 years, I have yet to see any sign by any one of the 3 supposed stub collector streets in our subdivision. So I did want to point that out to you. We're not coming here as a group of neighbors complaining about something that we knew about when we purchased our homes. There were no signs, so we did not know that these were going to be stub streets. Now, if you look at the map, you'll see I live almost at McMillan. And you might be wondering, well, I'm a long ways away from Dashwood. Why do I care? I care because Alpine Point already is being used as a cut-through by folks who live in Settlers Bridge, people who live in the other subdivisions surrounding us, and people who simply, pardon me, want to get through as quickly as possible to McMillan or Locust Grove while avoiding Eagle Road. And anyone who's been down Eagle Road lately can understand why during rush hour it's kind of a lot of trouble to get through Eagle Road. If we look at some statistics for the city of Meridian, last year Meridian hired a group called Raftelis to do some studies of population growth, demographics. Raftelis estimated that in 22 years, Meridian's population would hit 150,000. This year, Raftelis has looked again at those numbers, and they now feel that Meridian will hit 150,000 in 10 years. Okay, we've gone from 22 years last year to 10 years. And I'm kind of wondering what it will be next year. Are they going to say 150,000 in 3 years? Now, I have the greatest respect and appreciation for the formulas that you and your staff use when you talk about traffic and how traffic will affect us. And that is probably the most intelligent and logical way to approach these problems. But I think that the city of Meridian and Ada County in general are going through such an immense amount of unpredicted and unpredictable growth that even formulas like yours may not be adequate for dealing with growth of this magnitude, and it is really immense. Raftelis also predicted car trips in Meridian would increase by 30%. Okay, I see I've reached my 3 minutes.
Okay, just a couple of wrap-up
I'm very sorry
comments,
about that.
maybe.
I was just going to say, because traffic is increasing so much, please take a look at what we suggested. My neighbor Melissa has come up with a wonderful plan that should not be dismissed out of hand. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Are there questions? No? All right. The next person who's signed up is Patty Pitzer. Patty Pitzer, if you would come up and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Patty Pitzer, 2703 East Wainwright, Meridian, Alpine Point. Thank you, President and members. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Centerpoint is a designated commercial connector, and it's supposed to go from the shopping center out to Wainwright, where the commercial hits other commercial and then go out. What's being proposed here is basically pushing all of that shopping center traffic, the high-density apartments, the fourplexes. It's not just this infill, and it's being pushed through a very small portion of Alpine, but it's going to affect all of us. And with my calculations are right, with the 280 apartments, the 85 he's planning, and then another 97 that's being planned for the future, that's 462 units. 2 cars each, 924 cars. Multiply that 2 trips a day minimally, that's 1,848. That's not counting commercial deliveries, the post office, garbage, and it's not counting what's going to happen once someone figures out they can go from Home Depot all the way out to McMillan Road and bypass Eagle. It's just going to become a thoroughfare. And that's what I don't want to see happen to our subdivision. I think that the alternatives, I mean, it's supposed to be that Centerpoint is going to be that commercial collector. If DevCo cannot find a means to work with this with an alternative plan, then perhaps it shouldn't be allowed to go in until Centerpoint goes in. Not wait 10 years and have us deal with all that traffic for 10 years. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for me?
Are there questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that's the end of the list for those who checked the box and wanted to testify. Is there anyone else who would like to provide comment on this item? Okay, we'll start with you. If you would come up and state your name and address for the record.
Robert Hartley. I live at 4084 North Brooksburg Place in Meridian, 83646. I submitted a letter to the commission, and I assume it's in your file, so I won't go over that letter again. I found your point just remarkable, that the Ada County Highway Commission has no involvement in the density planning. The Planning and Zoning Commission determines the density, and they throw it in your laps to figure out how to support that density. I found that absolutely astounding.
That's kind of how it works,
I'm interested to
unfortunately.
see how you handle a Meridian Road in McMillan, that huge development out there with 2-lane roads going a mile each direction. My heart goes out to you. Are there any questions?
Madam President,
Thank you.
Okay.
thank you. Before you leave, take a moment and read the articles on the back.
Okay.
Because the reason that this unique creature called the Ada County Highway District was created in 1970 had to do with mostly fixing potholes in Boise. And so this is one of the unintended consequences. I bet none of those folks who considered that 50 years ago.
It scares me. It really does.
Yeah, because this issue doesn't arise in other counties. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And little history lesson, ACHD was created by an overwhelming vote of the people in Ada County to have a single countywide highway district instead of having 6 city road departments and an unincorporated Ada County road department. So it was something that was set up intentionally by the voters in 1972.
I wish you the best of luck. I really do.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question or comment?
Thank you.
No? Okay, thank you. I saw a hand over here. Please come on up and state your name and address for the record.
I have speech problems. My name's Anna Stowe. My name is Anna Stowe. Can you hear me now? I live at 4421 North Camas Creek Way.
Okay.
I don't have any statistics or anything like that for you. I do have some concerns. One is where you're trying to open up on Dashwood onto Wainwright. That is where our swimming pool is for our HOA. There's also basketball courts and common area. 1 block away from where you hit Wainwright is a playground. When you go out to McMillan Road from Camas Creek, there's another playground. All of those roads are where the extra traffic will be going by. Adding all of this traffic is going to make it unsafe for my grandchildren and for the other children who like to walk to the swimming pool. Right now, our community is so small that when you go towards McMillan Road, there's a little killdeer that comes out because he has a nest. We have geese, we have ducks, because we have a pond. We have part of a beautiful community. You start adding that kind of traffic, we're not going to see the ducks, walking across the road. We're not going to see the deer. We're not going to see the robins. We're not going to have our kids able to go out our front door and walk down to the swimming pool. I really urge you to please take a look at another option for a way to come in so that our community will be safe. And one more thing, there is a daycare on the corner of Wainwright. We also have multiple bus stops through the neighborhood. And it's safe now, but it won't be if you allow this to open up. Thank you very much. Please, please, I ask that you consider all of it. Any
Okay.
questions?
Other questions?
Thank you.
No? Thank you very much. Okay. Anyone else that would like to address this, please come on up. And state your name and address for the record.
My name is Paul Miller. I live at 4294 North Linwood Way. I'm the HOA Vice President. And just had some questions for you guys. First of all, thank you, because you guys all work real jobs, right? No?
This is a part-time job, yes.
Okay, you're all retired then.
No, some of us have
All
full-time
right.
jobs in
Well,
addition to this.
My question is what did you think of Maggie's proposal?
Well, we'll get to that in the discussion. I'm sure that the commissioners will have questions for staff on that, and then we'll deliberate on that at the appropriate
Is that how that
time.
works then?
Yeah.
Okay, did anybody present any other plan to you guys other than his plan? I mean, you presented it, but did your staff go through that?
I can't answer the question on what staff did or didn't do in that
staff?
regard. Mr. Price, did you have something to add?
Madam President, Commissioner Steve Price, ACHD General Counsel, this period of time is for public testimony. It's not for questions for the Commission. One of the problems is that we're trying to create a record. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. And when you ask questions, the Commission acts as a body, not individually. And so the questions, they can't answer to you. They can't reply to you. Individually, they have to, and anytime they respond to you, they would have to take a vote. So I know it seems awkward to you, but that is the state of how public meetings work and public hearings. So,
All right, I must have missed that when you guys started. Did I miss that? When you guys started speaking and saying that you can't ask questions? No, I'm not trying to be.
No, they have the Commission has the ability to ask members of the public and staff questions.
But we can't ask them.
But
I'm just saying, did they tell us that? Because I didn't hear that.
That is typically, they may have not said it, I don't know, but it's they're here to hear your concerns about a particular development and not to answer questions. It's just the way that they operate. They, as a body, they have to work collectively and not as individuals. When you ask a question, they then, in order to answer it, they would have to vote to answer that as a body. So I'm sorry, that's just the proceeding we're in.
Okay.
All right. Did you have further comments or concerns that
I'm
you
just
wanted
concerned
to add?
about the plan he has and the meetings we went to with him and how he just shoved us off. In fact, a couple of folks, they couldn't hear him, and he told them, well, you get a C+ for listening. You need to listen to what I'm saying. Another guy got a D. And so I think there's better plans out there than what he's proposing. And I kind of don't understand how it got changed from, what is the rating is 4 to 15. I didn't mind it if you guys put houses in there. If you made it like our subdivision, there wouldn't be that many homes. He'd probably still make his $1 million. But I think there's a better plan, and I think you guys can look at that plat and that land. Centerpoint's not going to go in there for 10 years. So the Longs are holding on to that until the price goes up, I'm sure. So Dashwood's going to be the only lane through there. Plus, it looks really great having a beautiful, nice lane going into his new subdivision. So anyways, sorry I asked some questions. I didn't know that was the etiquette or the protocol, so I'm new at this. So anyways, thank you guys for what you do, because it's a thankless job. You can't win either way. So see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there
Madam
anyone
President?
else?
Madam President?
Yes, Commissioner Baker.
I guess we'll just do a little primer here. We are only doing the transportation. This will be going to the city of Meridian for annexation because right now it's in the county. It will be going for the new rezone or the zoning in Meridian. The developer will ask what the zoning would be. So if it's an upzone from what it is now, which is probably agricultural, yeah, it's going to be different. He's also asking for a comprehensive plan map amendment. So that's at the city, and a preliminary plat approval, which we actually can approve. The property owner is the one who brings the application to not only us, but to the city, planning and zoning into the city. It isn't like, well, up until now, there was the comprehensive plan, and it's just it's a plan, but it's not set in stone, and it can change at any time with any application that comes forward. For example, if you owned the property, you would come up with the application, you would ask for a specific zoning, you would ask for annexation, and you would have a plan, which is exactly what the applicant is doing here. Neighbors have input. you bring things to us that, maybe we don't know or we haven't seen, that we can ameliorate the process a little bit. But the application comes from the property owner, not from the neighborhood at this point. So if you have questions regarding annexation or zoning or the comprehensive plan amendment, your issues about, what the density is or whatever, that's something to bring up with the city of Meridian, not here. But again, even at that level, the applicant is the one who's bringing it forward, not the neighborhood. So I know it's confusing, it's hard. If you've never dealt with this before, it is confusing. But that's the way things work, and that's the law. So I just wanted to make that clear, because there seemed to be a little bit of confusion.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. All right, is there anyone else who would like to provide comment on this item? Oh, yes. I didn't see you back there. Come on up and state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. Bernie Barrow, 2584 East Lacewood Drive, Meridian. I guess the biggest thing from my perspective is a traffic issue associated with what's coming out. But Wainwright is a very, very dangerous intersection, as it is. Once you watch the people making the opportunity to make a U-turn and the people coming out of Wainwright that want to make that turn on a red, it's a huge issue, because they have to make such a wide turn. It's not one of those lanes where you have the two lanes where you have that space and you can make that turn. It's a very dangerous intersection as it is right now, because you have those commercial properties there, the dentist offices and all the chiropractors and the daycare, and that's going on. Plus, with now that you have what's happening with those apartments, the only way to cut across Eagle Road is to make that U-turn at Wainwright. So that's a fundamental traffic issue. One of the gentlemen stated that half the homes in Alpine Point have RV bays and garages and RV parking. It's really closer to 2/3 of those 211 houses have 40 to 50 foot RV bays where we're allowed to park those on the street. We're allowed to use that street to load things. You have these sweeping turns and trees that are all planted along. You have the school buses going by. It's just not designed. Wainwright, as a connector, had that fundamentally been done appropriately at the halfway point on Eagle Road, it would have cut straight through Locust. But it doesn't cut through Locust like that. It cuts through our subdivision and then Settlers Bridge subdivision. And because it has that Locust and then McMillan and then Eagle, people are cutting through the small subdivision as well to get to the dentist offices and to get to the storage unit, and then cutting through our neighborhood as well. So you have school buses, you have children, you have the common area, and I really think it from a traffic perspective, the notion of 1,000 cars a day, and if you really think about that, the day is probably around 12 hours, not a 24-hour period. And it's during the time of the day when the kids are out there and when people are walking their animals. And there's only, I think, 2 stop signs in the whole Alpine Point subdivision. And people rarely use those as it is. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Are there any questions? No? All right, is there anyone else? All right, I'm not seeing any hands, so we're going to allow the developer some time for rebuttal, and then we may have questions for staff as well.
Thank you, Commissioners. Again, Deborah Nelson. Infill development poses challenges. And whenever you're the last one in, it creates problems for those existing residents, and you do have to connect through that property, and it's seen as cut-through traffic, but it's not cut-through traffic, it's planned connectivity. It was planned before this development was ever presented. That's why there are stub streets connecting to this development. ACHD policies require connectivity, and for good reason. It distributes trips evenly. Local streets in particular serve a purpose of serving the property that's adjacent to them and directing the trips from those homes to collectors. Here, ultimately, there is going to be this planned collector that goes through to Wainwright. It's always been planned, and that's going to create a nice backage road to Eagle Road and will provide some significant connectivity. But even before that, the local street connectivity is important as well. Again, for fire safety and for distribution of trips. But really, what I'd like you to focus on is what staff has analyzed so well here, is that with the development that has been presented to you, the trips that are generated by our development and taking into account all of the development to the south, we still are fully within all of your planned policies and the roadway capacities, including Dashwood. And I understand there's concern about that. There's only 8 homes on it. They're not used to this. But it is a local street. It has a capacity, once it's fully connected, to have 2,000 average daily trips. At this point, even when it's only partially collected, ACHD sets a threshold of 1,000. Either way, we are below this. And we are below this as proposed to ACHD. We also and that's what's demonstrated in our transportation impact assessment that was approved by staff. And with staff's proposed condition to put a temporary block at the bottom, we still are within 1,000. So with or without staff's recommended condition to block the south, we are under 1,000 trips per day on Dashwood. So we are within policies. We did design our development to create a circuitous route, and that's why the road is not straight through. That also creates some calming and diminishes cut through. As far as neighbor expectations, and it is always hard to know what people see or expect, but at least on these substreets in Dashwood in particular coming into our development, there is the type 3 barricade that's at the end. The pavement doesn't go through. The curb and gutter ends abruptly. It's not a completed cul-de-sac. I mean, it has all indications of a stub street. As is common with these, it has a temporary bulb out for turnaround for emergency purposes. Again, we meet all of the policies either way. We ask for your approval in accordance with staff's recommendation. I would stand for questions.
Are there questions?
I just had a question. Were you able to determine what the intended speed limit is on the streets that you're going to be building?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, we will comply with the speed limits that are required by ACHD. We don't have any proposed different speed limits than what are required for the roads.
And so what are they? I mean, we have to know what the speed limits are if we're going to design to those speed limits, right? Isn't that the order in which you do it? You know what the speed is going to be, and then you design to it rather than design it first and then decide the speed limit.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I would be happy to find those speed limits that I believe are set forth in the staff's report, but staff may be able to recite those faster than I can.
So then I guess that just wanted to clarify.
Staff provides some assistance here with that question.
There's no other design elements other than the curve of the road and the bulb out, the one bulb out at Jasmine and Centerpoint. Those are the traffic calming elements. Is that correct?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, we aren't proposing any additional traffic calming beyond what's in the staff report, if that's what your question is to me. Did I answer you?
Yep. Now I just want to get a sense of what the speed limit's going to be in this neighborhood.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, Gary Enselman, Deputy Director, Development Services, Development Technical Services. City Meridian sets the speed limit on local streets is 25 on all local residential streets. That's
25
be posted.
So that'll be on Jasmine and Centerpoint as well.
Centerpoint is a collector roadway. I don't know the speed limit off the top of my head on Centerpoint, but the local streets within the residential portion of the development would be 25.
And that includes Jasmine, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, on page 5 of the staff report, I do see at the very bottom, the citation to the district policy for speeds on collectors, and should not be above 35, or in a residential area not above 30.
30. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Are there further questions for Ms. Nelson? No?
Well, I suppose I hear your side of the perspective in terms of as the design was coming together, neighborhoods were proposing some design features that apparently didn't make any sense. We're not, obviously, we only deal with what's presented to us, and this is what's presented to us, so the process is. So I just wondered if there was any response to what the neighborhood said about some of the responses to the design features they proposed to ensure there were 2 access points to the subdivision, different access points.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, the design was, we did take into account neighbors, also city policies and requests for connectivity, also our own desires for connectivity and fire safety. There's a number of things that go into that. Certainly the circuitous route is designed to prevent cut-through traffic. There are other things that are not within your jurisdiction that we took into account, such as single-story homes, but that's not what you're asking for.
Yep, no, there's. Thank you.
All right. Are there further questions for Ms. Nelson? No? Okay. Do we have any additional questions for staff? No? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And Commission, you have this before you for action.
Madam President, can discuss this in greater detail. I move that we approve the preliminary plat for the Delano subdivision and recommend approval for the annexation comprehensive plan amendment and zoning.
Okay, so your motion is that we approve the preliminary plat and then we approve the staff report, which includes recommendations to the City of Meridian with regard to the comprehensive plan amendment, the zoning amendment, and what was the other one?
Stated better than I did.
Annexation.
And annexation. So, all right, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion.
Well, Madam President, these are always difficult decisions, and they're uncomfortable decisions for almost everybody involved. It's interesting, I heard a presentation a few weeks ago that stated, and we all know that growth is unprecedented here. I mean, whoever saw this coming. But that for every 100 households moving into Ada County, there are only 75 housing units for them. And so in the old days, remember, is what in the movie, if you build it, they will come. Well, they're coming. And so we're now at the point of, if they come, now we have to build it. And so this is an infill project, just like the developer said, or that you will hear it at your planning and zoning and your city council. Because so much land has been built out already. Just a few years ago, 20 years ago, where Alpine Point is, it was fields. They were growing food there. Dashwood has been stubbed since 2005, and whether it was ACHD that required it or the City of Meridian that required it is neither here nor there. It was stubbed. It's been known that it was going to be extended. And, the neighborhood has presented some interesting options, but the developer, unfortunately, is not required to accede to those requests at all. I mean, he's got his application, and that's what we have to go off of. Change is really hard, and unfortunately, growth in the county is just requiring, or just presenting that change to us faster than anyone anticipated or wants. I mean, I don't think anyone would say that this growth is desired or even helpful, but it is what it is. And, Alpine Point might think you have too much connectivity. I mean, you've mentioned that. However, what it does is, as has been stated, it diffuses a lot of the traffic, so you don't have it all go through one or 2 points. It's true, you may not agree, but it is true, and if you looked at it, you would see that. So they meet our policies. There's really no way we can deny this. So that's why I'm going to vote for it.
All right, further comments from the commission? Commissioner Hanson?
Madam Chair, I guess my concern, this is an issue we have very limited ability to act on because we are a special purpose district with very, very limited ability to make decisions that would that affect land use, density, and all the things, unlike other counties in the state. So we have very limited ability to do that. We also have been given, in this area, we see this all over the western part of the county, where there is really poor connectivity to start with. We design things to push things onto the arterials, and therefore there's a huge demand to go through neighborhoods in between. We don't have gridded networks like we do in the old parts of the city, which designers thought was bad, 30 years ago. Now realize gridded streets are really good because it disperses. We also don't have non-car options. So you have, you hit double whammy. Everybody's got to drive, and everybody's got to drive on Eagle Road. So we're kind of stuck with those consequences, and the connectivity is very important. What we can do is ensure that when someone drives through our streets, they are narrow, and they can't get over 20 or 25 miles an hour, and it's going to take them a long time. If they want to cut through and avoid McMillan or Eagle Road, they're going to have to just take their time, and they might have to go around some chicanes and speed bumps and other features, what we refer to as passive design features. And I was trying to find something that was more than just the bare minimum to ensure that when this little road gets attached to a through street, that people won't be speeding, and I couldn't see that. I haven't seen enough evidence that that's going to happen. There's going to be one chicane at one intersection, and then presumably the road curvature in and of itself will reduce speeds, and I can't help but think, based on the evidence we've had presented to us and the fact that we're being asked by neighborhoods all over this county to come back and retrofit with traffic calming to ensure that people drive at the speed limit, that the taxpayers won't be responsible for picking up that cost in the future.
Madam President?
Yes, Commissioner Ray.
I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. Thank you very much for your thoughtful comments. We have read all of your submissions through TELUS. To echo Commissioner Baker, growth is coming. It's hard. We do have some difficult decisions to make, but we are constrained by what we can and cannot do up here as a body. But I do want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you.
Commissioner Goldthorpe, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I really don't. I agree with everything that the commission has said, so I won't be redundant. Thank you.
Okay. And I would echo that these are difficult decisions. I'm sympathetic to the neighborhood with regard to your concerns about density. However, we don't have any legal authority to make those decisions, so we're not going to base our decision based on density. The only thing we can approve is the preliminary plat. This does meet all of our policies, so we have no legal basis for denying this application. Accordingly, I'm going to follow the law and support the motion. Any further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
All right, motion passes 4-1. All right, the next item on our agenda is, do you need a break?
Well, let's let the room clear.
Okay. We're going to take about a 5-minute break.
Yeah, it's good cheesecake.
welcome. I don't think so. I think I'll let you.
are you looking
Everyone's
for?
here. Oh, yeah, he's here.
I count 5.
All right, we're all recruiting. We're all back, so we'll call the meeting back to order, and we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Neville Ranch subdivision. And we're going to begin with a staff presentation.
Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Gary Inselman, Development Technical Services. This is a decision briefing on the Neville Town Center subdivision. In 2008, ACHD reviewed and approved the Cartwright Ranch Planned Community and the Neville Ranch subdivision preliminary plat. And this is located along Dry Creek out near Hidden Springs, as you can see on the map. The applicant is proposing to revise the preliminary plat. The revised plat is before us tonight for consideration, as well as a modification to the 2008 site-specific conditions of approval based on a reduction in lots and updated traffic analysis. So the planned community was approved with 620 lots. That original preliminary plat had 584 lots. And the revised preliminary plat is going to reduce those lots from 584 to 517, along with the revised site plan to reflect the reduction in lots and local street layout. And this is the site plan with the phases that have been constructed. As part of the 2008 action, a condition was included that required, prior to platting the 275th lot, the 36th Street extension and the widening of 36th Street to the south to Hill Road was to be completed. The applicant was not required to build the improvements, but the plat restriction was put in place. The widening of 36 has been completed, the extension has not, and the applicant is requesting that this condition be eliminated. So the rest of the presentation will review a little bit of history, talk about the 36th Street extension, traffic in general, and then development traffic impacts. So with the 36th Street extension, we'll begin with the programming that we'd had in the past. So you can see that the 36th Street from Hill Road to Cartwright was programmed in our integrated 5-year work plan for 9 years. 4 of those had a construction year of 2008. Then the project was removed from the integrated 5-year work plan in 2010. We completed a concept study for 36th Street Hill to Cartwright in 2009. It was adopted by the Commission in August. It did include roadway improvements from Hill Road to Cartwright. Those included bike lanes and a 12-foot pathway. It included a provision for roundabouts at the local street intersections up at the subdivisions to address concerns with the increased speeds and volumes on an arterial going through a residential neighborhood. And through that process, was made clear that when the extension was made, we would need to look at making some of those other improvements to address those concerns and other modes. The extension of 36th Street itself, not considering the rest of the road south to Hill Road, has been included in the Extraordinary Impact Fee Overlay Assessment District since it was created in 1998. That extension has always been planned to be funded by extraordinary impact fees paid for by the developments in the West Foothills. The current fee is $3,200 per dwelling unit, and that is paid in addition to the standard impact fee of nearly $3,100 per dwelling unit. And we currently have in excess of $1 million in that fund. These are the other remaining projects to be completed in that overlay district. And this is a alignment of that 36th Street extension design provided by the applicant's engineer. So as I said before, and with the development requirement in 2008, the developer wasn't required to build the street, but had a limit on the platting until it was completed. They did make an attempt to design and construct the street, though. They worked in good faith to satisfy that commission. They did have their engineer do an alignment and geometry for the street. We worked with the property owner who owns the land that the road would go through. They met with them several times. We've met with them annually. And they're just not willing to sell the right-of-way at this time. So ACHD cannot legally require the developer to acquire property from a third party to construct the off-site improvements, and without the right-of-way, this project isn't feasible at this time. We typically have many concerns raised over potential to add trips to the streets in the north end with any development in the foothills or further up Bogus Basin, as we've seen in the last 5-6 years with the developments further up Bogus. Staff has looked at this in the past and continues to monitor the traffic in the area, and want to provide a few slides from a presentation the Commission has seen in years past that just provides a little bit of background information on the historic trends of the traffic counts on a few of the representative streets. You can see on Bogus Basin from 2001 to 2018, it goes up and down a little bit depending on the year, but it's gone from 6,000 vehicle trips per day to 7,800. With the peak hours still well below thresholds and at 486. Harrison Boulevard, just south of Hill Road, stays fairly steady through the years from 2000 to 2016, just under 12,000 to just over 12,000 trips per day. Hill Road has a little more up and down, but still back in 2002, 11,700. 2017, 12,400. And then 15th Street has kind of bounced around from 6,100 to 6,800 over that 12-year period. So it's important to note that in the 2008 action, the volume planning thresholds were not projected to be exceeded with or without the 36th Street extension. The issues raised on the capacity of the streets related more to the geometry, the width, and the grades. We did require 2 significant improvements to be made that the applicant did complete in 2008. The first was to rebuild approximately 1.8 miles of Cartwright Road from Dry Creek Road to Pierce Park, including cutting down the hill, fixing the grades to be no greater than 10%, and realigning the intersection and raising the intersection at Pierce Park. The second was approximately half mile of roadway from the Stewart Gulch crossing to the Motorcycle Club. In the 2008 action, there was no nexus to the development for the 36th Street extension, and the applicant did provide the mitigation required with the other road building projects. Moving forward to today, the applicant's traffic engineer did provide a traffic analysis based on new traffic counts and approved and projected development in the area. The traffic analysis demonstrates that there is adequate roadway capacity without the 36th Street extension. The applicant has proposed to reduce the number of residential units within the Neville Ranch Subdivision preliminary plat. and the applicant has proposed to widen an off-site segment of Cartwright Road south of Pierce Park Lane adjacent to the trailhead parking lot for bikers and hikers. Based on ACHD policy, the applicant cannot be required to construct a 36th Street extension as off-site mitigation. And with that, staff does recommend approval of the staff report as written. I'd stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Inselman? No.
Madam President, the only question, no, well, go ahead. You wanted to, I just wanted a little more elaboration. Predates me. I think every member of the commission, maybe except one. You said there's no nexus to the project, and we could not legally require it, and yet we did require it. Can you explain what the rationale for making the requirement if there was no nexus and we couldn't legally require it?
Maybe that question would be better answered by our legal counsel. We were going to ask him to come up. Before we turn it over to Mr. Price, I did have one question. The developer has completed a number of improvements, as you pointed out. Do we know what the cost for those improvements? Do we know how much they spent on those roadway improvements?
Madam President, I don't have that off the top of my head. It was several $1 million that was reimbursed over time through the extraordinary impact fees.
Okay. All right. Mr. Price, would you give us a little advice and briefing on the legal issues here?
Sure, my favorite. Madam President, Steve Price, ACHD General Counsel. So, Commissioner Hanson, the question is, if we didn't have the legal authority to do it, then why did we do it? And you have to understand the context in which what was going on at the time the staff report came in. It was anticipated, it was in our programming that 36th Street extension was going to be improved. The Turtle family was also talking about giving us the right-of-way at the time so that would facilitate the project being developed. With that going on, and it was in our 5-year work program, we had an agreement with the developer at the time that, and by the way, they've always agreed that they would be willing to step up to the plate, even though they're not required to, and facilitate the improvement of 36th Street extension. And so it was anticipated with their agreement that they were going to do that. And so that planning threshold was put in there really as a soft agreement, a gentleman's agreement with them that they would get that done, or we would at least have some discussions about getting that improvement made by the time they hit that threshold. When the 36th Street extension project was removed from our planning documents at the request of the city and the county then, and the Turtlings, we really didn't have a basis at the time to condemn it because we didn't have a planned project, then the planning threshold of the number of units of homes became impossible for them to satisfy that. And then the real question at that point is there any legal basis to do that? And Commissioner Arnold's asked me to remind you of the constitutional limitations of which a governmental entity can require improvements from a developer of land. And the U.S. Supreme Court has interpreted our Constitution that a governmental entity can only require those improvements that are necessary to mitigate the impacts that are caused by development. A governmental entity can't require improvements to deal with existing deficiencies. Many of the deficiencies on Cartwright and 36th Street, and some of those are all existing deficiencies. And we don't have the ability to do that. We also, there's different constitutional tests about our ability to require off-site exactions. We can't require Costco or Winco to provide improvements to the many intersections that are in the vicinity of their development, and clearly those businesses, they generate a lot of traffic and they cause a lot of stress within the intersections that we have in the area. I wish we could. but property owners have property rights, and that at the end of the day, we can only exact those improvements to mitigate the impacts of their development. The developer in this case has been a developer that's always gone far and above what we can legally require. The improvements that Mr. Inselman indicated that they made on Cartwright Road, and some of those are much closer to their property. My understanding, it was north of a couple $1 million to make those improvements. They did that not necessarily just because they're in the business giving away money, but it was going to make their development better, and it's going to make it more valuable. But they agreed to do that, and we put it in our staff report as a condition because they had agreed to it. That planning threshold, as it went into the staff report, was because it was something that they agreed to, and it was really as a marker to make sure that to keep all the parties interested in going forward and getting the 36th Street extension constructed. Unfortunately, the circumstances have changed, and now we're here tonight, but we can't enforce that condition, and that's where we're at.
All right. Are there further questions for Mr. Price?
Thank you. That was helpful.
Thank you. All right. We will hear from the developer next. And if you would, please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Deborah Nelson. My address is 601 West Bannock Street in Boise. I'm here on behalf of Cartwright Ranch, and with me are members of our development team, including our traffic engineer, our site engineer, and other members from the developer who are also available to answer questions. We really appreciate your time on this issue. We appreciate ACHD staff's careful review. We are in agreement with their report and their recommended conditions. And Gary covered this thoroughly, so I'll just touch on a few points. As Gary noted, when Cartwright Ranch began its approval process in 2006, ACHD at that point had long planned to construct the 36th Street extension themselves. It was even scheduled for construction in 2008, but was postponed due to budget constraints. Given the prospect at the time that our application was pending that the 36th Street extension could be delayed, ACHD's main focus with the Cartwright application was whether or not there was capacity to serve the development on other existing roadways, in particular Cartwright Road. ACHD needed to make sure that the development was going to be fully mitigated with or without 36th Street extension. So at ACHD staff's request, the developer submitted a revised traffic impact study that completely took 36th out of the report. There was no longer any distribution on that road, and that was submitted in November of 2007. And it analyzed the development at full build-out without that extension. That revised traffic impact study concluded that improvements were in fact needed to Cartwright Road to increase the capacity, and that once those improvements were completed, that all impacted roadways and intersections at issue with the development would operate at acceptable levels of service. That was accepted by ACHD. Within the very first year of approval, before 2008 even finished, and this was finally approved in the early 2008, Cartwright Ranch had already completed all of those improvements on Cartwright Road. And yes, they were just over $2 million, and they were repaid over time with impact fees. Cartwright Ranch has also made every effort to complete the 36th Street extension, even though that was originally planned as an ACHD project. It wasn't required for the developer to do it. We didn't enter into a cooperative development agreement, an extraordinary impact fee agreement, as we did with the Cartwright Road improvements, but they tried to get it done. They hired an engineer to design the roadway. They determined the right-of-way that was needed. They worked with the landowner on the design. They took the landowner's feedback. They modified the design. They offered to acquire the right-of-way. and to construct the roadway. In the end, the owner decided that they were not quite ready to sell. ACHD's plans have also changed over the years, and you got the detail of that history from Gary. In the end, the 36th Street extension is not currently on the 5-year work plan. Given these circumstances, and now that Cartwright Ranch is prepared to final plat its 275th lot, we ask the Commission to remove that second condition from your preliminary plat approval. We appreciate and agree with the statements that are in the staff report and were in the presentation tonight from your staff and from your legal counsel that ACHD does not have the legal authority to condition a development with an improvement that is not needed to serve the development and is on land they do not control. We have been willing, as is evidence from the efforts that have been made, to construct that if the right-of-way is available. But unlike you, we don't have condemnation power, so we have done everything we can there. Aside from those legal concerns with the condition, from a practical standpoint, the 36th Street extension is still not needed. Cartwright Ranch provided an updated traffic analysis that shows there is still capacity in the adjacent roadways serving the development without the 36th Street extension. So just as was anticipated in the 2007 traffic study, the completed Cartwright Road improvements have mitigated those impacts. And so as presented, we still are in compliance with ACHD's policies. So for all these reasons, we ask you to approve this request as recommended by your staff, and I would stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Nelson? Did you have some questions? Commissioner May?
Would you be willing at all to work with our staff on a new development agreement regarding the extension right-of-way? Would that be something you would entertain?
Madam President, Commissioner May, absolutely. If there is a way for ACHD to obtain this right-of-way, the developer remains willing to enter into the same agreements that we did for Cartwright Road, which is a development agreement, an extraordinary impact fee agreement, so that at such time as the right-of-way is available within our build-out, we would complete that construction.
Thank you.
All right, are there further questions? No?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We have a number of people who have signed up to talk about this item. I'll go through the list, and if you didn't indicate that you wanted to testify, you'll be given the opportunity at the end. The first one who has signed up is Steve Marzoff. And if you would, please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Steve Marzoff. My address is 2025 Harrison Boulevard. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in front of the Commission. I'm here this evening to voice my opposition to the applicant's proposal to eliminate the original condition of approval for this development requiring the construction of the 36th Street extension. In the ACHD document dated May 16th addressed to this Commission, I fail to see any reference to the impact this proposal will have on the downstream historic neighborhood roads of Harrison, 15th Street, and 13th Street, which are already at or exceed the historic traffic capacity. The traffic analysis for this proposal is very site-specific. I believe that you as a Commission have a fiduciary responsibility to take into account the greater global view of the impact such a recommendation will have on traffic congestion in this historic north end. The applicant at the time of the original approval, wherein the condition of the 36th Street extension was clearly stated, was fully aware of the risks involved in securing the right-of-way. Now that the applicant has been unable to negotiate a right-of-way, they want to eliminate the risk and responsibility they originally agreed to. The families of the North End should not have to bear the burden of mitigating the applicant's risk. When I read articles about how Boise is one of the fastest growing cities in the country and one of the best places to live, the articles often write about the culture of the city and reference as examples of that culture the historic North End, Harrison Boulevard, and Hyde Park. Our neighborhood is already over the traffic capacities and reasonable levels of service. I call upon you to help to cease the degradation of this historic part of our culture and community. As a longtime resident of this community, I respectfully request that each of you, as elected officials who represent all citizens of Ada County, deny the request to proceed development without the 36th Street extension. I want to, as a side note, the slide that showed the traffic counts on Harrison Boulevard only showed from Irene to Hill Road. It did not show the entire Hill Road, which, if you look at it, there was a count done back in 2017, I believe, which was over 14,000 road trips. Harrison Boulevard is a 1 mile stretch of road, and the entire stretch of Hill Road, 15th and 13th need to be taken into consideration, not just one small portion. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No? All right. Looks like most people did not check the box. Let's see if I can find another one. Well, we have one that says maybe. Emily Borner, would you like to provide comment? Please state your name and address for the record.
My name's Emily Berner. I live at 4343 North 36th Street, very close to the roundabout on Hill Road and 36. Mine are more points of clarification than anything, and since I know I'm not supposed to be asking you specific questions, I was wondering if I might ask this of other people. A point of confusion being Neville Ranch versus Cartwright Ranch. Is it the same thing? Same thing, okay.
Yeah.
And then I had a few other questions, so I think...
You can ask your questions. If there are questions that staff can answer, then we'll try to provide that information for you.
Madam President, she can ask questions that are based on fact or that can be answered with facts.
Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering about turtling and the inability to require to get the right-of-way. I was just curious. It sounds like you've met with him annually. Is that correct?
The best thing to do is ask your questions, and then when you're all completed, then he can answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rather than have a colloquy, just ask the questions.
Okay. Right-of-way acquisition has been discussed on an annual basis. I'm just clarifying. That's all.
Okay, do you have other questions? Let's go ahead.
That's actually it.
That was it? Okay. Mr. Inselman?
Sorry.
Okay. Madam President, Commissioners, on average, we have met with representatives of the turtling company probably once a year or a couple times a year to check in on where they're at. They'll run proposals by us or see what's happening on our end. So we do speak with them quite frequently. I can't say it's every year, but on average, probably.
May I ask one more clarifying question?
Absolutely.
Do I ask you this question or? Okay. Would the extension from Cartwright to 36 require additional road widening beyond what has been done on 36th to Hill Road?
Madam President, Commissioners, the extension itself would not require other improvements to the existing 36th Street, but our concept study that was completed in 2009 recommended substantial improvements to the existing street that we would certainly want to consider before building the extension.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there, that concludes the folks who indicated that they wanted to speak to this item. Is there anyone else who would like to provide comment? Yes, please come on up and state your name and address for the record.
William Junk, 3859 West Deer Path Drive, Boise, but that happens to be in Hidden Springs. And I think I did indicate on the sign-up sheet that I wanted to speak for a minute. I think we all find ourselves in a box that doesn't have many ways out of it. You as commissioners and the district have certain responsibilities and very little leeway. The developer is up against a rock and a hard place on that requirement. And those of us that live out in the Dry Creek Valley are the ones that have to deal with the traffic conditions going to and from our homes. None of the roads that lead in or out of the Dry Creek Valley meet standards. It's encouraging that the developer has been willing to offer improvement of a small section of Dry Creek near the Polecat Trailhead, but in some ways that's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It's a small section. It doesn't really address the problems that we're seeing with traffic. I've lived in my home out there for about 10 years, and I have seen a substantial increase in the traffic that goes past me on Dry Creek Road over that period of time. We're looking at about a 3 to 4-fold increase in the number of homes in the valley over the next 10, 15 years, depending on economy and build-out times and so forth. Plus, we're also seeing a substantial increase in the traffic coming off of Highway 55 onto Dry Creek Road and then onto Cartwright Road headed into Boise, because it's a nice, convenient way to get from the north side of the valley into the downtown area. I hope that you will see fit to challenge your staff to figure out a way to disperse traffic coming from the Dry Creek Valley via Cartwright Road into the area where a lot of that traffic is headed, rather than just putting it on Harrison, as one of the previous speakers mentioned. It seemed like for the last decade we have been promised a connection to 36th Street, and then all of a sudden it goes off the plan and is unfunded, and now we're at an impasse with the developer that can't do it because they don't have the legal authority to appropriate that land, and a property owner who is not interested in selling at this point in time. So I hope that we can find some creative way to solve these kinds of problems and do it before other development takes place and blocks the opportunities that we might have to find a creative solution that helps everybody. Thank you.
Well, you're right. This is a very unusual situation. The landowner that owns the land where the 36th Street extension would go has no involvement with this project, and they are unwilling to sell the land. So we can't legally require somebody else
I understand you can't require
to go
the developer
build
to do
something
it,
on land they don't own.
but ACHD could build the road.
And then you have that compounded to some extent by the city of Boise. The city of Boise has requested that we remove the 36th Street extension completely from our capital improvements plan. The city of Boise doesn't want it, so
It'd be interesting to know their reasoning, but
creates a further
that
dilemma.
creates problems for some of their citizens that live in the north end.
Yeah, it does. It does. Are there any questions for him? No? All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Yes, please come up and state your name and address for the record.
Julie Sanservino and 5267 North 36th Street. And I guess my concern would be that the way 36th Street is now, we've got a golf course, we have 3 softball fields, we have a junior high, there's no room to expand it anymore. And right now, they just finished doing some improvements for the developer that's already developing a bunch up there now. And so if if that were to stay open, then I know you brought up, or somebody said, you'd have to look at improving that road, and as it is, I mean, the dog bone is good news, bad news. It's bad news when you live on 36th Street trying to get out in the morning, and it's bad news on 36th Street when you're trying to get in at the end of the day, so, and then if you add that to be a thoroughway. So I just hope that if it were to stay on the books, or if it were ever to be put back on the books, I would hope that would all be addressed, that you've got a street that is, are you going to take up the softball fields for the kids? Are you going to take the junior high? Are you going to take the golf course that's owned there? I mean, so all these things have to be considered too. I mean, I understand everybody else's concern, and I think what we're all kind of, we're on our street too, and we're affected by a developer that's developing a lot there and changing the traffic pattern too. So I would just hope that would be addressed if it were to stay in, or if it were to come back in. That's all I've got to say.
All right, thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. Anyone else who would like to comment on this? Yes. Please come up and state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Autumn Street. I live at 1415 West 4th Street, which is near the corner of 15th and 4th. I simply am here to ask that the original condition of approval from 2008 to connect 36th Street to Cartwright be maintained, so that downstream neighborhoods share this extraordinary burden of traffic from these homes that are built out. As the representative from the earlier developer stated, ACHD policies support connectivity, and this is exactly what that is, that connection. This request to vacate the requirement is in opposition of that stated ACHD policy. Vacation would set a dangerous precedent. The requirements aren't truly required. I think that that's something that the city of Boise should be concerned about. I do understand that the right-of-way is not available at this time, and I would ask that we simply not remove the possibility of compliance in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? No? Okay. Come on up. State your name and address for the record. I think most of us know you, but we'll make you do that anyway.
Ann Hausrath, 1820 North 7th Street, Boise, 83702. I am the Streets Chair for the North End Neighborhood Association. I clearly understand your dilemma. We have a condition that it appears you legally can't enforce. As you know, the reason from our point of view of the downstream neighborhoods is this still exists. As we've heard from the previous one, connectivity is important. Dilution in this case is not the real solution to our problem, but this development is going to put more traffic down the North End streets. You've heard my mantra. We're going to oppose absolutely every development that puts traffic down our streets until we have a funded mitigation program. We are asking you to be proactive. We oppose the granting of this request, but we also recognize they were probably going to do it. And I appreciate all the efforts that the developers team has made, and so we request that you voluntarily think about giving us a little bit of traffic calming on Harrison or 15th. Just voluntarily, if each development could do this as we work out a bigger solution for the downtown neighborhoods, we could all get along a lot better. So we are asking you to be proactive. I mean, we can't go back and fix this stuff 10 or 20 years ago, but going forward, we know that Turling has about 1,500 acres that he's going to develop pretty soon. He's got folks working on it. There's the other developments too. Please, we beg you to work with the legislature, to work with Ada County, to work with the Boise City, to work with the City of Eagle, to work with us to come up with real transportation solutions for the downtown neighborhoods. In the 21st century, there have to be ways that we can do this. Otherwise, we're just going to come here complaining for every single development, and we would much rather work with you proactively with all those entities. I don't say it's going to be simple or easy, but we're willing to work, and I bet all the other neighborhoods are too. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there questions for her? No? All right, is there anyone else? Yes.
Three.
We'll take you next. Yes, that's fine. Say your name and address for the record.
My name's Stephen Raymond, and I live at 3800 Rock Garden Lane. I realize this is a very difficult situation for the developer, and I'm not sure it's even legally enforceable, what was done at this stage, but my biggest concern has to do with the amount of traffic that's being dumped on a fairly simple intersection at Bogus, Basin Road and
Cartwright.
Thank you. Anyway, if you look at the numbers in the application, with the first phase or the first half of the houses being built, the traffic is doubling approximately from 1,900 to 4,000 vehicles entering in that area. And with the second 250 homes, it'll double again, which will raise the traffic on Bogus Basin Road by about 30% or more. So if you know that intersection now, there's no left turn lane, there's no accommodation for any turning traffic either way. And in your report, it also points out the fact that it's not really feasible to make an adjustment to that intersection. And the suggestion was to put a sign up intersection ahead, which I think is creating a very dangerous situation. You know, you're going to have a lot of traffic flowing through an area that's not really set up for it. So I think that your consideration should be on some improvements, specifically in that area, if you're not going to do the extension of 36th Street to handle that traffic. This doesn't speak to all the problems of downstream neighborhoods. That's a totally separate issue, but I consider this a safety issue.
All right. Questions? No?
Okay. Well, thank you for your time,
Thank you.
President and Council.
Thank you.
All right, I saw another hand back here. Come on up, please, and state your name and address for the record.
And there's a lady in the back there.
And then there was somebody over here, too, so.
Good evening, Madam President, Commissioners. My name is Pete Newton. I live at 1009 North 19th Street, Boise. I think we have one item that we all agree on, that I don't think there's a legal basis to require the contract or the developer to do the 36th Street extension. I suspect, however, since they did not object, that the limit on the number of housing units that's in their current approval is a legal requirement, which I don't believe you have any obligation, any legal obligation to waive. So I think we're in agreement that they don't need to build 36th Street. There's no legal requirement for that. But they did accept a limitation on the number of units. That's what they're asking you to waive. And there was a reason for that limitation. It was 20 years of traffic studies that said there would not be enough capacity absent the 36th Street extension. Traffic studies which you've accepted as a matter of fact, at least one of which I believe was submitted by the applicant. This is an opportunity to avoid future Curtis Road, Ustick Road problems. If you approve this expansion of development without the capacity being there on the existing roads, you will create chaos and costs in the future. You've all lived through it. Everybody has watched it happen as we've built beyond our infrastructure and then had our incessant battles as ACHD and ITD tried to solve the problems when they were really bad. I believe you have a legal opportunity to avoid a future chaotic situation. I'm hoping you will do so. That's the extent of it. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions, anyone? No?
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then I saw someone over here. Yes, come on up. And please state your name and address for the record.
My name's John Adams. We live at 12338 North Humphreys Way in Hidden Springs. I had a question for your legal counsel, if I could ask the question.
Sure.
I was trying to understand what you were saying when the first development agreement was put together. There was a condition precedent put in that agreement that the developer approved and signed. Are you saying it's not enforceable?
Madam President, we've never entered into a development agreement. What we've been talking about is a staff report that the commission approved in 2007, and it was a condition of that commission approval. If we had had it in a development agreement and the developer had agreed to it, then we would have a contractual basis and the ability to enforce that condition.
So you're saying that condition is unenforceable?
It is unenforceable because it was not in a development agreement.
Okay. I guess, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Going on, since the developer has indicated that they would be willing to put up some funds to do the 36th Street extension, that if you're going to allow this to be vacated, then an agreement for a financial agreement to improve 36th Street when and if Joe Turtling decides he wants to sell or until you decide you want to implement, what's the term? To take the land from him through condemnation, that the developer would at least have the funds to help pay for those improvements. And he's agreed, I understand, to do that. No?
We'll let Mr. Price address that question.
Again, Steve Price for the record, General Counsel. What the developers agreed to do is to explore the opportunity to develop that. And if ACHD is able to acquire the right-of-way from the Turtlings, then they would there would be some development of the design and agreement relative to the design, the construction of the road. They would go, I imagine, and fund for the development of that road. But as part of our extraordinary impact fee program, as the attorney Deb Nelson indicated, they're entitled to full reimbursement. So we don't, whatever improvements that they do, they're legally entitled to full reimbursement through it's part of our extraordinary impact fee. So they may outlay those dollars up front to help pay for that, but then they would be reimbursed for that. So we don't need to set up a trust fund for them to put money into. The most that we could hope for is for them to actually pay for those costs up front and then be reimbursed at a later time.
Sure.
And currently there's $1 million in our extraordinary impact fee program to go towards that project or other projects that are within that overlay district. So that's really the program that we're looking for. The cost in 2007, 2008, and Gary, if I'm wrong, it was north of $10 million, and that does not include the cost of the right-of-way from the Turtlings. Mm-hmm. So, and in all likelihood, that project has increased probably 20 to 30%.
Is that project still on the burner?
It was removed from the burner. It is within the extraordinary impact fee burner, but in terms of ACHD programming, it was removed from our 5-year work program, and it is now not in any of our programming, which makes it difficult for us to condemn the property. We have to have it within a planning document.
And I would ask the council to put it back on the front burner and get it there to where condemnation proceedings could commence to finish the 36th Street extension. It would take a lot of pressure off of Hidden Springs and the neighborhood. Another point I want to bring up, I think if and until the issue of punching Highway 55 through to the freeway to alleviate huge traffic congestion. That needs to be addressed again and again. We really need that extension. Right now, we're down to Glenwood and Eagle Road. For how many homes? I would ask the council to please put that back on the agenda to discuss it.
I think the project you're referring to is what we call the Three Cities River Crossing.
Yes.
That actually is something that ACHD spent several years and some money trying to get that done. In the end, it would have to be an ITD project because that's a state highway, and we were unable to get ITD engaged in proceeding forward with that. So that's not on the burner either.
Boy, I would
You
hope
might-
something could be done, because without it, it's a mess.
And you might bring that up with ITD. We do
We'll
have a
give them a call.
local ITD representative that you could talk with about that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else? I think I see. And if you would, please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Madam President. Commission, my name is Aisha Christina Stuckargassi. I reside at 713 North Stilson Road. And I have, since I'm here and wasn't taking good notes at the beginning of your presentation, sir, I had a question. You had mentioned the lot reduction at the beginning of the presentation that the developer was asking in relation to the question on the table, and that was from 275 to, can you remind me that number? Or
Madam President, Commissioners, the reduction in lots is in the total lots in the preliminary plat, which was approved at 584 in 2008, and it would be reduced to 517 total lots in the preliminary plat.
And then I had another general question that may be for the legal counsel, but I'm not sure. And I believe it is a factual question, but correct me if I'm wrong. Are there any other developments that have relation to 36th Street that staff, in a staff report for such development, there was a suggestion for a condition of approval regarding 36th Street being extended through?
Madam President, again, Steve Price, General Counsel for the record. So are you asking, are there any other developments that are being proposed that would necessitate the improvement of 36th Street?
More specifically, if a condition of approval was suggested by staff for other developments that the traffic flow would impact 36th Street and require or necessitate the need for that extension.
Well, if we receive any other development applications, and I'm sure we will, we will certainly look at the traffic impact. We require a traffic impact study. We look at what that demand from that new development and what its impact on Cartwright Road and the other adjacent roads. And we would use that as a basis to make a determination of whether to go forward with the 36th Street extension. We most certainly would bring it to the Commission's attention that there would be additional demand. If there are warrants that where that development are going to clearly exceed the capacity of that network, that all of those would come up, and the formation of those conditions would have to be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. But this issue, the 36th Street extension, I guess maybe this is the point, and other developments in the foothills, that most certainly is at the forefront of any consideration by staff. In the future, when we do this, we most certainly will try and develop conditions that mitigate the impacts of that development on the motoring public.
Thank you. And just a point of clarification, I did ask if there have been any in the past. So it's not speaking to the future,
okay.
but
I'm sorry.
past,
Yes, there have been. There's been the Dry Creek development, which is to the west of Hidden Springs. Those traffic studies show different traffic patterns, but yes, there have been reviewed and the 36th Street extension, if I recall, was not at the forefront or a condition of those developments.
Okay, so I won't bore you with another question.
You're not boring me. I love it.
I will ask a hypothetical that may warrant a follow-up regarding whether or not those recommendations by staff for an extension of 36th were made in a planning agreement or if they were made in just a staff report, because I'm worried about potential precedent being set in this case that would then open up the door for future developments that could necessitate an extension of 36th Street then being denied. Let me just double check.
No, that's a fair question.
Oh, yeah.
And most certainly, we're very concerned about precedents and the way that we make decisions, but you can be rest assured that our policies address those type of issues and to make sure that we don't do that, and that comes through the traffic impact study. You know, one of the concerns that we've had, especially with our constituents on Harrison Boulevard, and that is that we've seen an increase in traffic, although I don't think just environmentally, I think we've seen that, and there's been lots of different types of traffic, more pedestrian traffic, different modes of transportation, which is all very good. But there's also, because of the zoning in the foothills north of Harrison, there's been other developments that the city has approved, which has created obviously more motorist traffic within the north end. And so it isn't just Cartwright. It's also some of the other approvals in developments that are in that area. And frankly, those are more of a concern than the downstream traffic that's at Cartwright, because there's a lot of other avenues that disperse that traffic onto our network. So we continue to look at all of those developments wherever they are, and we look about what kind of impact that's going to have, not just on Harrison Boulevard, but other roads that are sensitive, and we put in traffic calming measures. We do whatever we can to try and make those safe for the motoring and pedestrian public.
Thank you. And Madam President, Commission, I know I've been up here for a little while, so I wanted to ask if I could follow up with one other thing that hasn't come up in tonight's proceedings that I think is potentially interesting. It was interesting to me when I found out. Can I have a moment?
Yes, but please try to wrap it up.
Of course. So it has come to my knowledge that the developer had time to appeal the condition if they didn't like it, and that time has passed. And I understand that there's no legal grounds given the plot reduction and the fact that it wasn't in a planning agreement document. But another interesting point for consideration that I think frames the potential need for extending 36th Street for future developments and the tight spot that we're in terms of traffic flow and kind of the given that the foothills are given its current conditions going to be developed. And with that, I'll leave.
All right, are there any questions?
No.
No? All right.
Thank you.
Was there anyone else who would like to address the commission? Yes, back here, if you would come up and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. I'm Leslie Nona, and I live at 6411 West Dry Creek Road, so I'm up in the foothills. And one issue that has not been brought up, which is a constant threat in any foothills development, and we've seen this in the Dry Creek Valley before, is wildfire. And so when you think about roadways and access and evacuation, this is a real issue. It's a real issue. So having appropriate infrastructure, it's not only important for traffic, it's for this exact reason. So with all of the development that's slated for that valley, I think you really, really, really need to think about this particular issue, because it's a big problem. And I think it's only going to get worse. There is not great fire protection in that valley. It has to come through Ada County Fire District coming up the road. The fire station has not been manned at Hidden Springs ever since its development. And there was a house fire recently. It was 22 minutes before a responder could come up. So, this is a big issue. It's a big issue, and I really want you to think about this. So like the 36th Street extension, very important, just for these kinds of reasons. And you're going to see more and more of this. So please bear that in mind. Any questions for me?
No? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to? Okay, come on up and state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Jay Carmalis. I live at 3943 West Deer Path Drive in Hidden Springs. If I understand what I've been hearing here tonight, the developer originally agreed not to build more than 275 homes unless this 36th Street extension was built. They assumed that risk, assuming that was a good chance of having that extension built. It turns out that assumption was not founded, but the restriction is still in place. Now they want you to vacate the restriction so that they can build out the rest of their 518 homes. When you add all those homes and all those new car trips in with the 1,800 some homes that are going to be eventually built out at Dry Creek Ranch, we're talking thousands and thousands of more cars every day on Dry Creek Road and Cartwright Road, with no substantial improvements being done to those roads at all, and they're already getting very crowded. I fail to understand if the ACHD's purpose in life is to make sure that traffic flows smoothly in Ada County, what is your compelling reason for vacating the restriction for the developer? All I see is that it's a guaranteed way to make traffic worse, and it's not your responsibility to help Ada County develop these currently undeveloped spaces. It's your job to mitigate traffic and help traffic flow. So that's a rhetorical statement, but that is the situation as I see it.
Well, and we do try to mitigate traffic, but there are legal constraints on what we can and cannot do. And this happens to be a situation where we can't require a developer to make off-site improvements.
Correct.
On land he doesn't own. We simply legally cannot do it.
Exactly my point. You can't require the developer to do anything about the 36th Street extension, therefore nothing will be done. But if you vacate the requirement, then they're going to go ahead and build more homes with more traffic. So I don't see any compelling reason for the ACHD to vacate the requirement in favor of the developer.
Well, and our legal counsel tried to explain that earlier, that the legal reason is we can't enforce the limit. We can't enforce it. And Mr. Price perhaps can further enlighten you on that, but.
I'll take another shot at it, Madam President. The condition is not, I think there's some confusion, that the developer did not formally agree to it in an agreement to that cap. If that was the case, you would be right. We would have a contractual right to enforce that condition, and they would have assumed the risk, and all of those points are true. Instead, what happened was that in our staff report, we put it as a marker to encourage the parties to get the 36th Street extension built. That, as a result of that, we can't enforce that legally against the developer. So the scenario you're looking at is contractual. Ours is through a staff report, and we don't have that as a legal tool to require those improvements.
So why are we having this hearing? If they can go ahead and build the rest of their 518 homes without the 36th Street extension being in place, then what's stopping them? Why are we even talking about it?
Because the way that a final plat has to be approved is that it has to mirror the conditions that are there. And I'm sorry it didn't work out that way, but because we have to approve the final plat, they have the legal ability to go forward. That is the reason why.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address this item? Seeing no volunteers, we'll give the developer an opportunity for rebuttal.
Thank you, members of the commission. Deborah Nelson. I do have one slide that we're going to pull up here. I'll try to address all the concerns we heard, but focus maybe on Harrison and 15th first with a little bit of response on that. There was questions about why Harrison and 15th and other North End streets were outside of the scope of the study. That study area is dictated by ACHD, but they follow compasses, modeling, and standards on that. Where you've got less than 10% of site trips at a particular intersection, then the study area doesn't include, because otherwise you could get into some very distant downstream minimal impacts. And so the estimated site traffic at Hill Road and Bogus Basin is 5.3%, well under the 10. But even though it was outside of the study area, we did actually ask our traffic engineer to ask Compass for the current impacts with and without 36th on Harrison and 15th south of Hill, and it's negligible. In fact, based on their current modeling, it's just slightly worse if it's built. And the reasons, I think the practical reason is that when you're heading that direction, if you're heading downtown, whether you go through Hill or Bogus, you're going to end up going through the north end. If you're not going that direction towards downtown, then you're going to take some of the other streets that feed off of 55 or Siemens Gulch or Pierce Park. So there's, just to try to address some of those concerns, even though that's outside the scope of what we looked at, we wanted to make sure you had that information. On the legal issues, we appreciate the concerns and also the response that your legal counsel has provided. Obviously, we don't agree that the original condition was legal then, nor would it be legal for you to continue it. We're asking for you to clean that up as appropriate and consistent with your current standards. ACHD doesn't require off-site improvements that are impossible now. I've heard you say that in multiple developments, and that's what we're asking for here, is for that to be made consistent and lawful. The U.S. Supreme Court has been clear in the cases of Nolan and Dolan that off-site mitigation has to have a substantial nexus. It has to be proportional. Part of what goes into that is if it's not needed. It wasn't justified by a traffic study. It isn't needed now. And if it's not attainable, those factors make it not proportional on its face. At the time, there was no findings made to support it. There was no evidence in the record to support it. It was just an expectation that ACHD was going to build it. And we didn't agree to do more than we ever can or could now, which is we can work with ACHD to enter into a development agreement and an extraordinary impact fee agreement, just as we did with Cartwright Road, to the extent that that right-of-way is available. Then we can participate in that construction. This is why ACHD has impact fees, is to distribute the cost of mitigation of impacts equally across your development community. And Cartwright Ranch contributes significant money, not just your standard impact fee, but also the extraordinary impact fee. And so where we can complete construction and take reimbursement as the fees become available, we are willing to do so. Where we can't, we have to pay fees. So either way, we have to pay our fair share. And that's the system that ACHD has under the Development Fee Act to make that fair. And so the longer that we are paying fees into your extraordinary impact fee fund, the more money you have once you have right-of-way to do the improvements that you choose. There was a particular question from Ms. Berner about the contact with the turtlings, and Gary provided the response from ACHD. I can tell you from the developer's comment, 10 times during the last year they contacted Mr. Turtling, including this week. So they certainly have tried. There was comments about desired connectivity. We couldn't agree more. Developer certainly does promote connectivity and understand the policies for connectivity, and that's why they've tried so hard on this development to do that. Just see if I had others. I guess just in some, there was discussion about, displacing our mitigation on impacts on others, but really fundamentally there wasn't any mitigation required associated with 36th Street. There wasn't any required then, there's none needed now. So I would just ask you to go back to the traffic study that's been submitted and accepted by your staff, that the development impacts do comply, they're fully mitigated and do comply with all of your policies. And we ask that you remove this condition 2 so that we can proceed with the approved entitlements. And I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Nelson? No?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Commission, you have this item before you for action this evening.
Madam President, I just want to thank Mr. Price for his clarification to all of us regarding the previous staff report. Thank you to everybody that sent in comments and are here tonight sharing those with us. And I really want to show appreciation for the applicant for their willingness to work with staff on developing a development agreement. So I would like to see about making a motion to defer our decision this evening, and so they have time to work with our staff on a development agreement regarding 36th Street and the right-of-way.
All right, we have a motion to defer this item. Is there a second to the motion?
Well, Madam President, I guess I'd ask the legal staff, do we need to defer it? Can we not just roll into the motion that staff will work with the developer in order to come up with a development agreement?
Madam President, Commissioner Steve Price, again, there is, no matter what, I was just going to simply say that staff will go ahead and pursue all opportunities to work with the developer in developing a development agreement as well as an extraordinary impact fee agreement to facilitate the development of the 36th Street extension under any circumstance that would have happened a week ago if we think we could get the right-of-way. If the Commission gives us the direction to look at the possibility of ACHD acquiring that right-of-way, that will, but we can do that in a future meeting. There's if it's the Commission's will, there is no need to defer that. We will do that. You can include that in a condition of the approval that staff be directed to pursue that and come back to the Commission in the future. We're happy to do that. Or you most certainly can defer it and we can come back and give a report at some of the preliminary details that would be issues that we'd have to confront going forward down that path.
Is there a second?
So if you want to defer, you can. If you don't, it's not necessary.
But well, I guess my question for you, Mr. Price, is we can't legally require them to enter into a development agreement to build this. So do we have a legal basis for deferring this to try to get that agreement in place?
But you have the legal basis to get additional facts relative to that. The developer, through their counsel, has agreed to explore that. And you can defer and we can see what shakes out of that dialogue, but that is not necessary for you to act on tonight's application.
Okay, so we can accomplish the same thing without deferring it.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
So I'll go back. Is there a second to the motion to defer?
Or does the maker of the motion want to change the motion?
I could definitely change the motion. I would be open to doing that. So the motion would be to vacate,
approve
the request to vacate the prior agreement.
I'll second
Yeah.
With the stipulation that they are going, can we have a condition? Didn't Mr. Price say that we could have a condition attached to that motion?
Yes, but really the motion should be to approve the staff report as presented, which would remove the condition and instruct staff to work with the developer in coming back to the condition to the commission with a proposal for the development of the 36th Street extension.
Okay. So is
So
that your
moved.
motion to
So moved.
approve the staff report as written and approve the request for modification of the previous decision with some direction for staff to try to come up with a proposal
Right, to pursue that.
to extend, a development agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Yes.
Saw that coming when I said yes.
Okay. All right. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, Madam
Yes.
President.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
And Steve, I'm going to try to be helpful here tonight, and sometimes I'm successful and sometimes I am not. It seems to, don't laugh. It seems to me that part of this issue, and it was brought up by the other handsome gentleman with silver hair, that this is a non-issue for your municipal government. It's not even on the CIP, which means it virtually does not exist. If I were to be really helpful, I would encourage you to approach your municipal government and request that this be reinstated on their priority list. It can go directly from 0 to GO, meaning GO being the 5-year work plan. And kind of with as a snarky comment maybe, this is an election year. Might not be the worst time for you to think of that. Anyway, so yes, I did second that.
All right. Further discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I agree with Ms. Nelson. There's no nexus to this project. We can't legally require it. There was no nexus when it was originally attached. You can't make something legal that wasn't legal to start with. And we're not, I recognize the frustrations because there's the larger issue of all the developments in the Northwest are having an impact. We only have 3 routes that go east-west in the Northwest, north of the river: State Street, Hill Road, Cartwright, and all that massive development is coming down it. I think this just simply exposes the tools that this agency, this special purpose district have are very limited. Our legal constraints, even though we are tempted to exceed them, are limited. And this really does expose the weaknesses of addressing that kind of growth, especially in the northwest part of this county. As you said, we need 21st century solutions, Southwest. Well, we're trying to do this with old bifurcated 20th century governing structures, and I think we have to address that part of the issue. There's so many more tools that are available if we didn't have these limitations. But I'm voting for the motion on the basis that there is no nexus.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. That brings us to the public communications portion of our agenda. is there anyone who would like to address the commission in public communications? Being no volunteers, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.